Hi everyone, in today's tutorial we'll explore OCA components and events. We will try to understand how to use these components to modularize our code and how to implement component events for clean decoupled event-driven programming. But first of all, what are components? Components is a framework that encourages modularity by encapsulating logic into reusable, composable classes. All of them are related to a collection. A collection groups components together defining the context in which they are used, and each collection is tied to a specific Odoo model. The good part of this collection is that it might allow us to define some specific variables or fields that might get used by all the components. For example, if we are building a custom notification system, we could define a collection for notifications and group all related components like email sender or SMS integrations within it. This keeps the logic modular and avoids conflicts with components from other domains. Another example would be to export documents to a different system like Magento. So we would have a collection of Magento configuration, and each record would specify the URL and user and password of each Magento instance. And then we will define a component for each model that we want to export. But why it is important to decouple business logic from models? Traditionally, in Odoo, business logic is often embedded directly in the models, which can lead to a tightly coupled code that's harder to extend, test, and maintain. Decoupling business logic from models brings several benefits. First of all, we have an improved modularity because logic is moved to these components, making it easier to isolate, reuse, and test. Also, we have easier extensibility as we can add or modify functionality without altering the base model. And we can have cleaner models by uploading the logic from the components, and we enhance the maintainability because the logic and the workflows can be done independently. For instance, if we are checking the Magento example, we will have a component for exporting sale orders, removing all the logic from the model. In a similar way, we will have a component for exporting partners or products. The good part is that the similar code might be defined on a base component, and it will not be inherited on each model. And what about events? Component events allows Odoo modules to communicate using an event-driven approach, making it easier to handle interactions between the coupled components. It simplifies implementing custom workflows, and these workflows will not break with another one, because this way we can reuse function names, and even we can handle them in a different uh, scope. And it also encourages a clean and extensible architecture. These components and events are helpful when we are triggering actions based on external events like file imports or API calls, or extending features without modifying the core module logic. It resembles the idea of creating abstract models for managing integrations. However, we have complex examples of how to improve this search and so on in order to select the best component. And it is really useful when our system is really complex, like we have in EDI. Also, it's important to know what the work context is. The work context is the work environment or context that will be passed transversally through all the components related to a collection. This is also the entry point to a component system. Work context is not defined every time, but it is useful to be aware of them because it will be used when we enter this component system. So uh, now we are going to test an example of how to do it. In order to do that, we need an Odoo environment And also we need the connector GitHub repo in our system. So let's check this example. So in this case, we have a small module that it's called component example. In this component example, we have defined that my collection, that it will be the collection that we are using, and REST partner. At REST partner, we had added a new function that it will just call this component. In order to do this, we need to first get the collection, and this way we are just creating one, and then we create the work context, and it is done with the work on. This is useful because the context, the collection, will check which is the model that we are going to work on. So he can select the best component available. Then we just need to select the component on the work context and execute the run function. What this function is doing, it's easy. So we go to the components, and we have created a new class that has the specific usage. And once we press the run, it will record a message. And it is a small example, but it's really useful. So what will happen there? Well, when we are on a contact, when we execute the component, you can see that the function is the message is posted automatically, and the logic is outside of the model. In a similar way, we can check how events work. In order to do that, I created another module that's called component event example, and here it's even easier. On the REST partner, we added a new event, a new function. This function is called extra component event, and it just calls the onExtra component and notifies it. What this will do? This will get this function and will try to find all the listener events related to REST partner that has this function. So they will be executed one by one. So what happens there? We have on components, we have a handler or a listener. As you can see, it inherits from base event listener, and it applies to REST partner. So when we have the on extra component, we will post a message called message from event handler. Okay, so once we go back to the browser, we have the other button. If we press it, it will write down the message from event handler. However, the best part of the events is that we can add more listeners. So if we define a second listener, we call it my second event listener, and it's from second event handler. We save it and we restart the Odoo system. If we go back to the browser, now if we press on the events, you can see that both events were executed. So it is easier to have workflows that execute two actions in, and then they are decoupled better. So here we found a small example of how to use components and events. It is true that usually we will not have to handle this kind of a specific configuration like work context or similar configuration, but it is useful to know why they are used for. It is true that in small examples we can handle this kind of configuration with abstract models, but it's really helpful when we have complex environments. Thanks for all, and thank you for watching me, and see you next time.